Okay, well, thank you all once again for joining us. I'm Nathan Scott. I'm the Executive Director of Mass Energize, and you are here at our monthly Community of Practice meeting. So really happy to have you, happy to see all the communities being represented. And I think tonight we're going to have a really interesting, some presentations, but then also really interesting conversations. So as always, these meetings are really intended for you, for the members of the Community of Practice, our communities. So this is a place to ask questions, a place to share what's going on. And really it's a place for dialogue. So we really actively encourage dialogue, questions, answers, sharing, whatever's up for you. This is a good place for it. So we try to balance having some speakers and presenters, but I don't want to overwhelm the time with presentations, because this really is intended to be a place for you to kind of bring any issues that are up in your community. So please remember that those are actively encouraged and welcome. Okay, well, we have some speakers and some presenters with us tonight who I'm really excited about. We have Julia Gold from National Grid, and Kevin Braun from Eversource, excuse me. So Julia and Kevin, love to hear your presentation. And then later on, we're going to be hearing from Anna Vanderspek from Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Did I get that right? Sorry, GECA. I always know them as GECA, but so looking forward to the presentation. And so Julia and Kevin, take it away.
Thanks, Nathan. And thanks for having us, everyone. So we're here tonight to talk about some really exciting programs. As I think many of you are aware, our companies over the past 2.5 years have been working on preparing for our new electric vehicle programs across the state of Mass. At the end of this past year, the last moment on December 30th, we received our approval of our programs, and so we've been excited to get them launched and have a lot to share tonight about what we're offering. So I'm going to jump in. Kevin and I are going to share an overview of what we have for our programs, but definitely encourage you to ask lots of questions. We'll go through each of the programs to start. But if you have specific questions or want us to sort of go back to a certain slide, I think I'm happy we can definitely do that. Most of our programs, as you're going to see, are similar across utilities. So we work together on proposing these offerings. There's some nuances or some unique differences for a few things, but as you'll see, the majority of our programs are consistent across the board. Just to give you a little bit of background, if you're less familiar with the utilities EV make-ready programs, as we call them, many of our programs, as you'll see here, started back in 2018, 2019, our first commercial charging programs. The one thing I just want to highlight here, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, as you can see, our initial investments, Eversource had a $55 million program from 2018 to 2022, National Grid 2019 to 2022 at 21 million. We are exponentially growing our programs here. So in December, the approval between our two programs was almost $400 million for the state through our ratepayer programs. So extensive investment and an expansion of all the different types of offerings and customers that we can now serve through these programs. So really very exciting. A lot, I think, to celebrate here. So one of the other things I just want to quickly highlight is that the development of these programs, and I think I maybe shared this with some of you previously when I presented to this group before we had approvals, there was a lot of work that went into designing these programs to be aligned with some very specific guiding principles, focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our communities, creating equitable and affordable access to clean transportation choices, and really doing this in a way that provides for an optimized grid, thinking about managed charging programs and teaching our customers about how their timing of charging interacts with the grid and our clean energy future. And then lastly, we're doing a lot to coordinate both across our companies as well as state agencies and the goals of the Commonwealth. And really excited, I think this is probably most important for all of you, we're really excited about finding ways that we can partner with stakeholders and partnerships that can help get the word out, whether it's better coordinating with municipalities and the entities that you all work with, or with the residents of your communities, making sure that people are really aware of these programs. So if you have, we are going to be hosting a future session to engage stakeholders and also hear how we can better market and outreach to our customers. And so if you are interested in participating in that, or if you have ideas, we're really eager to hear them. So just I'll put that note there for the future. The other piece that's really critical for these programs, and one thing that was a very important thread woven throughout all of the programs that we designed in this filing, was that we wanted to make sure that we were thinking about how environmental justice communities would benefit from these investments, regardless of individuals' vehicle status. It's not about people driving cars, it's actually about how do we bring the clean air benefits to communities. And so thinking about, fleet electrification, transit electrification, school buses, the ways that we can help clean up our communities and reduce air pollution. And so as you'll see throughout this, as we go through the program designs, you'll see that there are targeted incentives or unique incentives for our customers that specifically are within environmental justice communities. So at a high level, just so you get a sense of sort of the categories of programs that we're going to talk about this evening, our programs are sort of broken out into three key segments. We have public and workplace programs. We often call those sort of our commercial programs. They're for our commercial customers to deploy public and workplace charging. We have our new residential programs. These are programs that provide support directly to our residential customers. And then we also have fleet programs targeted to commercial customers who are electrifying their fleet vehicles. And so I'm going to start by covering our residential programs. I'll give this warning in advance. There's a number of eligibility criteria that I'm going to go over in this, and it can be a little bit complex. So I'll walk through the tables. We can definitely answer questions after. I will say that if you are a residential customer, as you go to look at enrolling in or signing up for our programs, we walk our customers through to make sure they understand what incentives they are or are not eligible for. There's three key offerings within the residential segment. There's the residential EV charging program, a turnkey installation program, and then our off-peak charging program that provides rebates for off-peak charging. So I'll go over all three of these.
Hey, Julia, it's Ellen. So since we've worked together, I get to interrupt you. So when you say it's confusing and you can walk people through, how does that happen? Does someone call?
I can only speak for National Grid, and I'm going to say, so unfortunately, the Department of Public Utilities created a lot of eligibility criteria that we did not propose. So we wanted it to be a little bit simpler. And unfortunately, that is not what we ended up with. So what you're going to see on the next slide, as you can see this table, there's all these different categories. There's different eligibility criteria depending on the household type, if you're in an EJC, that's based on income, or EJC that's the criteria is non-income, but still an EJC based on the state's criteria. So there's a lot of factors you have to sort of walk through to determine, okay, what incentive level am I eligible for? And I'm sure Anna, who's on the call here from Green Energy Consumers Alliance, has been walking through all of our programs and trying to make sure she understands them for her stakeholders. And has been helpful in making sure that we're explaining things clearly. But so when our customers go to our website now, there is actually a site that walks you through and you have to check off. are you this, are you this? And it helps our customers determine the correct incentive level. And I'm saying this for National Grid. I know Eversource is working on their own website and applications for their programs. But I'm not trying to blame or I guess I'm pointing my finger at the DQ a little bit, but we want our programs to be as clear as possible. I apologize that there's so many criteria. It can make it confusing. So just sort of saying that up front, but we are always happy to help customers better understand that. So let me explain. So we have sort of two components. When we initially, and sort of
let me just answer one. Somebody asked a question, Julia. So yes, Julia is talking about both Eversource and National Grid. So all of these programs that we're going to walk through, we'll note where there are distinctions, but 96% of our programs are identical, and that's on purpose.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Yep, sorry.
No, thank you. All right, so I'm going to first start with just the basic. So for customers who are not on our low income rate. So for a customer who's on a standard National Grid or Eversource residential rate, if you live in a single family home and you're not on our low income rate and you're not in an EJC, you can get up to $700 for wiring upgrades in your home. And so what this allows, so if you're a customer who's looking to or buys an EV, and maybe you need some wiring done in your driveway to, provide outdoor access to a 240 volt outlet, or maybe you need some wiring run to your garage, or maybe you need a panel upgrade, but you can get up to $700 to support that upgrade in your home to help provide level 2 charging, 240 volt access for your vehicle. That any of the residential programs I'm talking about here, as you'll see under the qualifications column, you are required to enroll in a managed charging program. So for National Grid, that's our off-peak charging program, which I'll talk about, and Kevin will talk about what Eversource is going to be developing and providing. So that we actually have our off-peak charging program underway. So anyone who receives those infrastructure incentives will be required to enroll in that program before those funds are received. For 2 to 4 family homes that also are, not in EJCs and not on low income rate, there's additional incentives they can receive because we recognize that for multi-unit housing, it can be more expensive to do the wiring upgrades depending on the structure of the house, the setup. So we offer up to $1,400 for a 2 to 4 family home. Same requirement for managed charging. So that's sort of the base level for standard residential customers. And then what I'll show on the next slide is when you get into some of the more complex, higher incentive levels for our either EJC customers or low income rate. And there are some differences here. So I'll go through each one. So if you're a single family home that lives in an EJC, you can get up to $1,000 for your wiring upgrade instead of $700. If you're a 2 to 4 family in an EJC, and I should clarify, this is any EJC. So I think I misspoke before, but and it's because it's different for all of our residential versus commercial, but for our residential programs, you just have to be in an EJC. It doesn't matter which criteria it's based on. So it could be income, it could be rate. So for 2 to 4 families, you can get up to $2,000 for your wiring upgrades. And then it's the same for single family and 2 to 4 families if you're on our low income rate. But the difference here, and you'll see on the next slide, is that those customers are also eligible for an additional incentive to provide. Oh, actually, it's here. I'm sorry, my screen was. You're also eligible for up to $700 to cover the cost of a charger. So the actual charger hardware. Now, you don't have to put that in if you just choose to install a 240-volt outlet and the vehicle you drive isn't capable of participating in our off-peak program. So it gets a little complex because you have to be able to participate in the managed charging program. Certain vehicles are eligible through what we call telematics, like through the vehicle's computer data. Some vehicles are not, and you need to then buy one of the chargers that's eligible under our program. So for customers who are on our low income rate, we will cover the cost of that charger as well as the wiring upgrades. So that, I see you pondering, Ellen. I don't know if anyone has questions about that, but while I'm here, I can pause.
Yeah, so
that-
you're reading my face. So does you said two things. You said the charger rebate was $700 and it has to be a charger that allows you to look at what they're using. But you said we cover the full cost. So do you think
that will cover the cost of the chargers that there are a number of eligible chargers in our program that cost less than $700.
okay, so that really covers the full cost, basically.
If you're low, now I will go on the next slide. We also offer low income rate customers a full turnkey service where where everything will be just covered. There's a vendor who will do it all for them. So if they don't want to use their own electrician, I'll go to that next slide.
And when on low income, these are people, the way you judge it, they already qualify for the R2 rate. Is that?
Yes, they actually have to be enrolled in our R2 rate. And Kevin, I forget, I don't know if is that what you call your Eversource rate as well?
Yep, same name.
So it gets a little tricky because there's a lot of tiers for eligibility, but these are very generous offerings. And one of the things that I just want to point out is, there are very few residential make-ready programs like this in the country. This is one of the first programs of its type on the East Coast. There are very few utilities offering these types of programs. It's really exciting for Massachusetts that customers are going to be able to access these resources. It really will help to, I think, defray the cost of buying an EV. It reduces the stress of having to also pay for the electrical infrastructure and hardware that you may need. So that's our goal here, is to really, limit those barriers, reduce those barriers that are preventing people from making the switch to electric vehicles. So the last, what I mentioned here around turnkey is that for customers that are specifically on the low income rate or in an EJC, we also offer a turnkey service. So they can access our vendor that we will provide, that we will offer, instead of having to find an electrician. For those in EJCs, they're not going to get the rebates for the charger. They don't qualify for that, but they can have our vendor come in and do all the wiring for them. And then, as I mentioned, if you are a customer on the low income rate, you can get everything done for you by that turnkey provider, that vendor that the utilities will have hired. And I believe the way we are structuring it is that those customers then also will not have to come up with the funds to pay for this. So instead of it being a rebate, the cost of everything is upfront through the vendor. The cost is covered through the vendor. So, for a lot of low income customers, and this goes to, this is like what the state is trying to solve with the direct to consumer vehicle rebates. Having to come up with that money up front can be an additional barrier. So for our customers to not have to come up with that cash and have it be covered directly through the program is a big help. And then the last thing I will cover, some of you may be familiar with this program, as I mentioned, for National Grid. This is something we offer already. So I'll let Kevin cover the one for Eversource, but we have this program underway already. This is our off-peak charging program. And what it does, it provides our customers a per kilowatt hour incentive for the hours that they charge off-peak. So from June to September, you get 5 cents per kilowatt hour when you charge between 9 p.m. and 1 p.m. So for a lot of customers, your vehicle or your charger within the app that you use, you can just pre-schedule it and set it so that the charger doesn't turn on until 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. You can set it how you want, but that way you can plug your vehicle in when you get home from work, maybe at 5:30, but that charger isn't going to actually turn on until 9 p.m. So it helps to reduce, one of the things that I think this is really helpful for is just getting people to understand that they play a role in like grid health and thinking about peak time. A lot of people don't necessarily know what peak hours are. And so we're trying to also just get our EV drivers to be more engaged in understanding the grid and the role that they play. So this is, I think, a helpful program. And as you'll see in October, through October to May, it's a reduced kilowatt per hour incentive of 3 cents. The image on the right is gives you a sense of what our app looks like. So this is actually an app that you can just find or download on the App Store. It's very easy to use. It shows you what your rebates are. You can look at the month, the week, the year. Perhaps some of you on the call are already enrolled.
Julia, we do have a question. Martha Grover from Melrose has a question.
So sorry to interrupt your presentation, but this is something that I've been going back and forth with a number of residents who just bought their first EV and they're trying to figure out. So you can access the off-peak charging either through the telematics, but there are not a lot. There's a limited number of vehicles that work with the telematics, or through a networked connected home charger. So they can get this, they can enroll with either option.
Yeah, so on our website, we have a list that's updated regularly because we're constantly working with our vendor EV.energy to add new vehicles or new chargers. But if you go to our website, there's a list and it tells our customers which vehicles are eligible through telematics, or if not, if your vehicle's not on that list, what kind of charger you have to do this. Now, not everyone, we have heard that there are some people who already have a charger that doesn't work with it and their vehicle telematics don't work with it. At this moment, there's nothing we can do about that because we're, in some ways, this is a very nascent market, right? Like these types of programs are very new. And so we're working with the car manufacturers, the vendors who do the software here to try to make it feasible for everybody to be able to participate. But it's a growing and evolving situation. So, we hope that we're trying to serve everybody as best as we possibly can. But I encourage folks to check out which chargers, which vehicles can do what. And then if there are questions, just to reach out to us and we can support them to figure out the best way to be able to let them participate.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And then we also have another question from Susan Hogue.
Sure. Hi, Susan.
Hi. Not in the EJ zone, outside of the zone, if you have a 2-family house, do both of the units have to be low income to get the whole house done, and do you just do one, or can you do both?
No. So I think the way it's structured is based on the master account.
The what account?
The master account. The owner, whomever owns the property has to be the one to sign up for the program, or Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you have a tenant who is low income and is on one of the units, they can apply as well, and they have to have permission from their landlord. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah.
So let me just rephrase that. In a 2 or more unit house that's not in the EJ zone, each unit has to be income eligible to get one.
No. So if you're in a 2 to 4 family and not in an EJ zone, you can still get up to $1,400 for your wiring.
All right.
So-
No matter how many people are income eligible in those units.
So this one isn't income eligible at all. This is the standard offering, so. If you, and Kevin, can you remind me if they have, it's per account, right? So if each account. Each unit can apply because they're doing an outlet for their account. So let's say you have they have to be separately metered. So Susan, if there's like, you have a duplex, right? And each unit has their own account with National Grid.
Okay, okay.
And they're not low income and they're not in an EJC, they still can get up to $1,400 for the wiring that they need to get that outlet. Or their wiring installed.
And what if one of them is low income? Do they get the whole thing?
They
I mean-
would, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And the reason those, it has to be based on an account, so they can't, like, if there's only one electrical, they have to have their own account that they're applying under. But if it is a low income customer and they apply, they would be eligible for that higher amount, that higher incentive and that charger rebate.
Thank you.
Sure. And Kevin, I'll let you jump in here if you want to
Sure.
share what.
Yeah. So Eversource does not have the off-peak charging rebate. What we are ready to launch, hopefully later this year or early next year, will be an active managed charging program. The reason it's not available today is that we're in a little bit of regulatory limbo with the DPU as we attempt to move our formerly named Connected Solutions out of our energy efficiency program and into the EV program. So we're working with the department to get that done now, but essentially it will be an active managed charging program for residential where drivers will be rewarded for either responding to demand response events or actively charging off peak, and we'll get off bill incentives for that. So it will come. To get a rebate, you will have to promise to enroll in the managed charging, and we'll make sure that happens.
So Kevin, sorry, it's Ellen, just to clarify, so the charts Julia put up make sense for Eversource, except it doesn't have this requirement for managed charging, but the amounts are all the same.
So the programs are identical. The only difference is that Eversource does not have a off-peak rebate program. Instead, we have only the managed charging program.
Okay, so you do have to, okay, sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so now, I'm gonna pass it off to Kevin to go over our commercial programs. Kevin, let me know, let me know.
Yeah,
I'll go.
no problem. And Nathan, I just want to be mindful of time. So
Thank you. Yeah, if you could, I don't know, can you wrap up in the next 10 minutes?
yes, I'm super confident we can do that.
Thank you.
We're just, so I think it was really important to go over that residential stuff in detail, because that's really the brand new stuff. It's the stuff that affects every homeowner and not just our folks who happen to charge at a workplace that has EV charging or visit a commercial location. So I think that was really important to spend the bulk of our time there, so we can go really fast over these commercial offerings, and especially since they're very similar to the programs that we've had for several years now. So we can jump right into it. And just to ground everyone, in case you're not familiar with what Make Ready covers, so it's everything from the service drop all the way up to the stub up of the charger would be considered make ready. The utility side make ready is everything from that stub up to the meter, and the customer side make ready is everything from the meter up to the stub up of the charger. So make ready is all of that equipment, be it transformers, panels, meters, conduit, trenching, all of that. Our programs, as they have in the past, will continue at workplaces and public locations, both level 2 and DC fast charger, to pay for up to 100% of the utility side, and then on a per port basis, up to 100% of the customer side make ready infrastructure. You can go to the next slide, Julia. Yep, perfect. Oop. There we go. No problem. So on the make ready side, these programs are essentially just like the programs that we've had since 2018 and 2019 for both Grid and Eversource. So as I just said, for public, located in an EJC, we cover up to 100% of the infrastructure. Actually, it doesn't matter. The eligibility requirements, they're all covered. So the make ready is essentially covered for all customer types, as it always has been. On the charger side, so this is a new element of our programs. So for, depending on your customer type and whether you're located in an EJC that is an income EJC or an EJC that is an other, so that's demographic or language, the amount of rebate that we'll give for the charger varies. So for income eligible EJCs, it's 100% for ports 1 through 10. And then it goes, graduates downwards from there for the various customer types. We're also giving, based on eligibility, rebate for the networking costs, because these, all of these public and workplace chargers required to be networked so that customers can find them. And for all the other various benefits of networking, but recognizing that our customers are telling us that the cost of networking was a barrier, we're offering, and the department approved, networking rebates.
Hey, Kevin, I'm just gonna,
Yep.
because this is being recorded and it's gonna be shared, I'm realizing we just got notification from the DPU on some clarification points that needed to be made, and one of them is not reflected in this slide, where you see the requirements for let's see, for
Right. So
public, for public, municipal, and non-municipal, where it says you have to install up to, you have to install ports 1 and 2 and ports 1 through 4 before you get EVSE rebates, those charger rebates. That only applies to level 2 chargers. So if someone is looking to install DCFC, there isn't that port restriction before getting the EVSE rebates, the charger rebates.
That's correct. Thank you, Julia. Yeah, the department just let us know on Friday that we could make that distinction now. So perfect. I think we can move on. So the companies do have two in this segment, 2 individual programs. National Grid is offering a $2 million in funding set aside for up to 5 customers to offer co-located energy storage at DC fast charger sites. And Eversource has a program we're offering $3 million in funding for up to 5 customer sites, designed to offer DC fast charging in what we're calling environmental justice community charging hubs, really designed to offer charging to locations where public charging and home charging wouldn't be available otherwise. Our MUD program, so that's apartment buildings of 5 or more units, is very similar to our commercial offering. We're just distinguishing it because it's a different customer segment. The only real difference with our MUD program is that there is no requirement for the chargers to be networked. But if they are networked, we will offer the networking rebate. So that's really a customer choice on the types of chargers that they install. We're also offering a program called the MUD EV Site Ready Plans. So we're cognizant that in a future where EV penetration is high, we want as many customers who live in apartment buildings who wouldn't otherwise have access to home charging to have access to home charging. And that property owners might want a plan for how they would electrify, if not all of their sites, all of their parking spots, the majority of their parking spots. So we'll walk them through what a project looks like to make that happen at a given location. So we're offering basically a consulting report that would walk them through what that future looks like. And I think, Julia, do you want to take the fleet programs quickly?
Yeah, and if you can, about another 2 minutes.
2 minutes, we can do it.
That's great. Yeah, so I'll just really quickly share that we have free offerings for fleets. We have Fleet Make Ready, so similar to the other Make Ready programs, but for you'll see there's sort of a difference between private fleets, public fleets, and public fleets that are specifically in EJC. So you can definitely dive into the details more if you're interested in the unique offerings, but for public fleets, there's an added incentive for the chargers as well as the coverage for the infrastructure. And then the other piece is that we will be offering, continuing for National Grid, offering a fleet advisory services program. This is for publicly owned fleets, so government fleets, as well as school buses, which we also just learned was approved. So this provides sort of the hand-holding support for fleets, public fleets, to plan how to electrify over time, what they'll need to do that. And then the last piece for National Grid is that we are expanding our off-peak program, our off-peak rebate program for commercial fleets as well. So same model as the residential offering, but commercial fleets can take advantage of those off-peak hours if they have that flexibility to do so. And then the last thing I'll just share is that we also had approval for a new program. It's 10 years that provides discounts for demand charges. So this is for commercial customers, especially those with DCFC or a large amount of level 2 chargers where you have demand charge, where you're on a larger commercial rate with demand charges. But it's based on load factor. So the calculation you'll see here, but basically, for these early days where you maybe have larger chargers being installed, you get a significant demand charge discount based on your annual average load factor. And that discount, depending on eligibility, will last that customer up to 10 years. Sorry, we went through that all very quickly, but hopefully that gives you a good sense of where our programs are. One thing that I just want to make a note of, and we'll be having more information posted, is that we did also just get clarification around third-party funding requirements. I think that's a really important one, especially for municipalities. But we have a number of requirements for our customers to apply for the Mass EVIP program, as well as other third-party funds. And depending on your project and whether you're eligible for those, we have to require our customers to apply for those programs, and then subtract the dollars that you receive. So I don't want to go into all of that detail here, but I think especially for municipalities, if you're relying solely on utility or grant funding for projects, it's important knowing that going into it, if you're not in an EJC and you're looking to try to get all of your costs covered, that we have to keep subtracting anytime you get third-party funding from what we can offer. So happy to talk to you more about that. That was an unfortunate outcome that we were not so happy about, because I think it does make it hard for projects that are not in the EJCs especially to fund if you need to cover all your costs through third party funds. A little tricky. All right, I'll stop there, Nathan.
Okay, thank you. So, and Julia and Kevin, if you wouldn't mind, please stick around. I mean, Anna's going to do a presentation now, but then we are going to open it up for just general questions. And maybe if you'd be willing to stay around, then people can ask questions of any of the three of you. Would that be all right?
That's great.
Okay, yeah. So Julia, if you want to stop sharing. And our next presenter is Anna van der Speck. And as soon as and then we'll let Anna present, and then we'll just have general Q&A for any questions you have of any of them. So.
Thank you very much. I will start by saying Julia and Kevin do not have an easy job trying to explain the complications of those programs to the public. And that is something that we will share in it not being easy for the next 4 years, because it really isn't. There's a lot of details, but I do really want to underscore that this is huge. Like the funding that was made available, that the DPU approved, is really needed if we want to install all the charging stations that we know we need to install by 2030 to meet our goals. The Clean Energy and Climate Plan laid out the number. It's a lot. We have a lot of work to do, but the programs are only as strong or will only move as quickly as the number of site hosts who reach out to take advantage of them. So National Grid and Eversource have a role to play in communicating to people these programs exist. And you need to take advantage of them. But all of us that are here as climate activists and the Mass Energized folks and all the other environmental groups across the state have a huge role to play in making sure that people know these programs exist, because this is wonky stuff. Nobody reads DPU dockets for fun. And so we all have a role to play in making this aware, making people aware that this exists. So I just wanted to frame this whole thing a little bit like that. I was asked to talk a little bit about how to engage people at the local level around EV stuff. So I have some short slides that just sort of share what we've learned. I'll start real quick for those of you who aren't familiar with Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We're a state-based nonprofit working to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low-carbon future. We do that across electricity, buildings, energy efficiency, and transportation sectors, both by running consumer-facing programs and then doing state-level advocacy work. So we were official interveners in that whole crazy long DPU docket that resulted in these final orders. We have run a program called Drive Green since 2016 that does a ton of consumer education. So we have lots of EV 101 webinars, we've got chats, we do in-person events, we do virtual events, we do the whole thing, and I'll talk about all of those. But one feature of the program that we drive people to is a car shopping tool where you can learn about the different electric vehicle models that are out there and compare them apples to apples in terms of price, in terms of state rebate, federal tax credit, how fast they charge, do they do DC fast charging, all of that. So this is a tool that sort of everything else we do is pointing back towards this tool to help people actually make the switch. But I'm here to talk about what we've learned in terms of engaging the public on EVs. And this is sort of the 7 key points that I'll dive into more deeply. But I'll run through them real quick now and then dive into them some more. So no matter what you're doing, we still need basic EV education. Getting butts in seats is the most impactful, but it's really hard to organize and it's only gotten harder. Existing EV drivers are your biggest asset. Trusted local partners are key. Variety is key. Fun and food are key. And sort of the overarching point is we can help. So I'll dive into all of those. So the first is basic EV education is still so very needed, and it's kind of astounding how needed it is. I recognize a whole bunch of people on this call who have been talking about EVs for years, and we still need to be explaining what is the difference between a hybrid and an electric car and a plug-in hybrid. We still need to be explaining, yes, your EV is cleaner even if you charge it from the grid. We still need to be explaining that there's a state rebate and a federal tax credit. So sort of one lesson that we've taken to heart is don't assume that people know the basics, just keep repeating them. We do a quarterly electric vehicles 101 presentation. We read a lot of blogs. We do a lot of in-person events, but the message is to really not underestimate how much basic EV education still needs to happen even for programs like National Grid and Eversource to be successful. The second point is on how to do that education. The best absolute thing you can do to convince somebody that an electric car is right for them is to get their butt in a seat and have them drive around the block. That is sort of undisputed. There's lots of data to support that. It is really hard to organize. So when we have done test driving events, we will only permit someone to be driving a vehicle if it is a vehicle owned by a dealership, because they have the insurance to cover it if something happens. It was hard to get dealers to come to events before the pandemic. Now it is almost impossible, especially because when an event is best for the public is basically exactly when it is not good for a dealership to attend. So for a public event, you want a nice weather day on the weekend, sort of around lunchtime. That's when people come. And that is precisely when dealership need their salespeople to be working in the sales room. So it's really hard to find a time that works for everybody. We've learned things like don't have an event at the end of the month because that's when they have their sales quotas to meet. So push it earlier in the month. But that has been a challenge, and it's really been a challenge since the pandemic. We have, because of that, allowed test riding at some of our events where instead of an individual test driving a car, they ride along while the EV ambassador who owns the vehicle drives. For both test driving and test riding, we've got a whole waiver ordeal that people need to get through before they can get into a moving vehicle, and that requires a lot of people on the ground to make sure you're signing the paperwork and have the wristband and are getting into the right car and somebody's looked at the license. So
Wow.
I don't mean to scare anybody away from organizing this, but it is difficult. And that's something that we want to make clear before people go, oh, we should throw an event together in 2 weeks from now. It's a challenge. The good news is that a static EV showcase goes a long way. So this is where you have EV ambassadors come out, open the hood, open the doors, let little kids honk the horn, but it allows people to get in the vehicle and get a feel for it. So for example, just get a sense of physically, am I too large for this car? Do I think my kids will fit in the back seat? How big is the trunk? Get all of those questions answered and have the experience of talking to a real person. You don't get the benefit of zooming around and feeling how fast the acceleration is, but it really does go a long way towards making people feel more comfortable with these cars. So there's the scale of difficulty and the scale of impact sort of go up and down in the same direction, but all three are great. That point about static showcases brings me to one of the biggest learnings we have, which is people who drive electric now are the biggest asset available to us. We've got a small army of people who've signed up as EV ambassadors that come to virtual EV chats. We have one coming up very soon where we just have a Zoom and break out into breakout rooms and people can ask questions like, where did you go on a road trip? Or how do you charge at home? How much does it cost you to charge at home? Without the pressure of like talking to a salesperson. And it's just also more fun. So we do these virtually, but we also do them in person. And we are always astounded when we put out a call for an event, the number of people who are like, yeah, I'll come, or I'd love to come. And it's just a much friendlier, less salesy environment to learn about the car and the technologies. So I am sure I'm sure because I see many of you on the call, but I'm sure that in all of your communities, there are EV drivers who would love to come to an event some weekend and show off their car for a couple hours. So those are a small army that we should all be using. The next point is that for an event in particular to be successful, you got to get people to come. And you've got basically two options for that. One is put the event in a place where people already go, or really make sure you're partnering with a local group. And many of you probably are that local group that can turn people out. So we've been really excited in the past year to be working in Quincy with Quincy Asian Resources, which is an immigrant services nonprofit, working really closely on an EV education campaign funded by the Mass Clean Energy Center. This is a really unique example because we've been putting a lot of emphasis on making sure that the content that we have is available in languages other than English, particularly Chinese and Vietnamese for the immigrant population there. That is a big lift doing all the translation, but the point is that Corey already has a bunch of people that they interact with regularly. And so we can tap into that existing network rather than having to start a new one. So an equivalent could be a church or a school or a YMCA or whatever it is. This is probably obvious and you all know this already, but it's worth saying out loud anyway. Point 5 is that variety is really key. And this is something that is only getting easier to do. When we started the program, variety meant have a Volt and a Ford C-Max Energy. And now there are so many different types of cars, both in terms of the style, is it an SUV or a pickup truck or a sedan, but also just the number of models. So I would say a huge portion of our EV ambassador army are Bolt drivers. We could probably do a showcase with 20 Bolts, but that is less useful than having a showcase with 3 Bolts and then a bunch of other ones. So sometimes we do have to turn people away or set up shifts because we have so many Bolt drivers, but making sure that there are the snazzy cars like the Tesla that people think that they're excited about, and then also the Leafs and the Bolts and the other vehicles that they're more likely to actually purchase. Having the variety is key. Having it be fun turns out to be really, really important too. So we have started inviting e-bike ambassadors to any event that we do outside, or e-bike shops or biking groups, because biking around a parking lot is fun. Has a whole other waiver situation that we can go into, but it's more accessible for people to bike around, especially kids. We've done raffles that bring people out. A simple thing like having a speaker playing music in the background goes a long way. Having food goes a long way. Those are all things we've learned over the last couple of years. And then lastly, I just want to say we can help. We definitely have more events requests than we can attend as an organization, but we are always happy to connect you with EV ambassadors in the area and let them know, hey, there's an event coming up here. If you want to go, here's the event coordinator. So I'm happy to connect you with our events team or answer questions in general, but those are sort of the top 7 points that we've learned over years of doing events like this. And that's already it.
Anna, thank you so much. That was brilliant. Really, really good to, you have been on the road, you've been in the parking lots, you've been there. So it's really great to share your wisdom, and the rest of us who are thinking about doing EV showcases or petting zoos or whatever, that was terrific. So thank you. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes. And I'm just going to open it up for general questions, conversation, sharing related to either what Kevin and Julia shared about all of the EV incentives and other, the charging incentives. And then also questions for Julia, just about organizing, EV events, promoting EVs in your communities. So happy to use the chat. Also, if you use your function, the raising your hand, Ellen or I can call on you and we'll take it from there. So Karen Watkins from Acton.
So I'm in the market for an EV, and I think just take me as an average person. So it seems like the federal rebates are pretty much out of the picture. And you know, like I didn't know about, we're in an Eversource service area. I didn't even know that you could get any money back for wiring related to level 2 charging. I mean, how do we convince people that now is a good time to buy electric vehicles, and how do we get this information out there?
So
Yeah.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No,
Somebody else.
no. Please
Go ahead,
On the-
Alma.
So our sort of organizational view on the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act that changed the federal tax credit, is that 5 years from now, we're going to be like, wow, that was game changing and we're so glad it happened. The short term, it's really messy. I don't want to pretend it's not. It is really messy. So right now we know what electric vehicles qualify for what until April 17th. And then on April 18th, the list changes, and then it can continue to change for the next 10 years, basically. And we know that from the 17th to the 18th, the list will shorten. We just don't know by how much. Our stance right now is a great time to be educating. There's never not a time that is good to be educating. If you are in the market, we can help and try and get you a car. It is challenging right now, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good time to be having these events and trying to explain to people what the incentives are, because as they stack up, it is a lot. It just takes a lot of effort to explain them to people, unfortunately.
Great, thank you. Okay, Daryl Warner from Milton. And you're on mute, Daryl.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Very, very good. Great presentation. Thank you very much. How do I get a map of environmental justice zones for Milton and surrounding like communities? Because this is where I do what I do. I had several questions now. I should have written them down. But what I've been trying to do is I talk to my friends and I tell them that you can rent a Tesla. I'll even pay half or a third. Let's go for a day and let's have some fun. And I'll help you rent a Tesla just so you can get an understanding about that, you know, get in an EV that it will be fun and that they could maybe buy. And then there was another one, but just knowing where these, my daughter-in-law has an EV plug-in hybrid, and she's a school teacher and she teaches in Milton. And it would be really great to have, you know, the town put in charging stations at the schools. So these teachers, I saw that there was something in the chat earlier about that, but I know that she would, and several other people at her school would love to even have a bigger battery vehicle that they could charge at school. I think level 2 is pretty good. And make DC fast charging that are like, I just saw some, they're like a 40 kilowatt chargers. So you don't have to be there so long. It's just an incredible, you just have to talk to people all the time, every day. Whoever you see, whenever you see them, and try to figure out, you know, where they are. Oh, there was a question that I had, and I know I'll
Maybe
stop
while you're-
talking and I'll raise my hand if I have another one.
While you're thinking about it, yeah, so maybe Julia, maybe could you talk about schools and charging at schools?
Sure. Well, and I just want to point out your first question. I put the link in the chat. It's also all over our website when you go to any of our programs, but the EJC map is based on the state, it's the state's map. You can type in your address and it'll show you exactly what criteria your address falls within, or which criteria are associated with your address. For schools, and I think you're referring to like public access charging for a school and this like public education, you know, level 2 charging is I think Kevin put some info in the chat. Level 2 charging is great for longer dwell time. So if someone is parked for 4 or more hours, that level 2 charging can provide great access, right? And for workplaces, like if you want to have charging for your teachers or maybe community members who come for like a nighttime meeting, it can provide some benefit. I wouldn't expect like a school, like an elementary or a high school, to install fast chargers, DCFC, direct current fast chargers. That's for, you know, highway corridors or locations where you have people doing, you know, within a community where you need those quick chargers. And I'll let, you know, I think Anna and Kevin probably have insight on this as well, but it's also very expensive to install fast chargers. And so unless that's an area where you have people going in and out and in and out, which I don't think schools, you know, you're not going to want random cars driving in and out of schools all the time. DCFC is probably not a good fit.
Well, could I follow up on one question for Anna? Can you send a waiver? I didn't realize you were doing the waivers, and I'd love to see the waivers because I've given a lot of test drives in my car, et cetera, and, you know, now you're making me nervous. And I've raffled my car off, you know.
The
at
waiver
various-
mostly protects us as an organization, saying you driver are agreeing to offer your vehicle and you passenger are agreeing that you're getting in a moving vehicle, and if anything happens, you guys figure it out. But I
Oh.
share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other thing I just saw, you know, sort of a note about, you know, sort of thinking about workplace charging, whether it's a school or an office, or public commercial chargers. There are many ways to encourage the EV driver to move their vehicle. So you can either penalize them if they don't move by charging them a idle fee. But you also, and like National Grid uses this structure, we have charging in our office buildings. You get an alert on your phone that says, like, you need to move your car within 15 minutes, the next person's turn is coming up, and you'll continue to get alerts. We don't penalize our colleagues for not moving their car, but I would say there's some social shaming if you leave your vehicle. So there's lots of different technological methods for getting people to do the right behavior that you want them to.
Okay, yes, thank you. Susan Hoag.
Yeah, what is a good approach to take if you go to a commercial restaurant or something in the EJ zone? What's a good spiel that you can give them to entice them to do this, knowing that their parking lot will be open and people will be using it during the nighttime? Sometimes owners don't like that. And another example is the car wash. That we have a car wash, and the guy isn't really too happy about having it open for strangers at night. And what can you say about that? Is there anything that you could give me a clue? What to?
I might share that those actually might not be ideal locations because people aren't staying for very long, especially a car wash is like quick in and out. So they're not locations where someone's going to stay parked for a long time.
Well, this one is just across from a housing unit. That's why I was interested in it. And they don't allow any parking, and there's no parking space in this housing unit, but across the street in this car wash, there's a lot of space. And he would like it if he could shut it at night, but that's, you know, that's when they need it the most, I guess. So anyway, it's difficult.
You have multiple challenges there because it sounds like a property owner who doesn't want vehicles there, let alone the complexities of adding charging. And so that's a tricky one. That would be, I think, a harder sell in some ways.
Okay, any other questions for, you know, on any of the topics we've covered? And then what I'd like to do is just open it up, open it up for a further conversation just about other general topics. But before we move on, yeah, any other questions? Ellen, do you have a question or want to share something?
Yeah, just a question. So just thinking about schools and also new buildings, you know, schools get funded by the SBA in Massachusetts. So are there requirements that when you're getting state funding that you have to put in charging stations?
There aren't even requirements that you have to be all electric. The MSBA is ridiculous. They're so far behind.
So I that's what I would encourage.
Don't get me started.
That's okay, Martha. I always like to tee you up to get angry. It's fun. But It does strike me, that the utilities, maybe you guys can do some advocacy with the SBA. It's a new administration, so maybe this is a moment, Martha, where we can fix that. And then I think, Kevin, you answered my question in the chat, but just make sure everyone knows. So if you're we're building a new building in Wayland, and it's going to be fossil fuel free. We haven't passed the specialized code, but we're committed to never using fossil fuels in new construction or substantial rehab. But everyone at the planning board said, so like, what's the EV things? How do we access that? So for towns, are we assigned a rep, or do we just go to the website and try to talk to someone? Like it, that's what I want to understand for our, so I'm not in Grid, Julia, unfortunately, I would call you, but I'm in Eversource for this one.
Yeah, so you could do two things. You could go directly to our, the implementation folks who manage our EV program, or if you are regularly interacting with either an account rep from the energy efficiency side or a community relations person who deals with your town on a regular basis, they're all going to be trained on how our programs work and be able to talk, should be able to talk our municipal customers through the process. But in the short term, while we get everyone trained up on all the intricacies of our new programs, you could either send me a note or go directly to our website. And there's I think we shared it at the end of the presentation. There's an email there, and someone will get back to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, Martha, and this will be our last question on this topic, and then we'll open it up for further general conversation. So Martha, yeah.
So I just want to say, yes, I agree that these programs are amazing, and it's too bad that the DPU kind of screwed it all up, but A for effort. And what we've done in Melrose is, rather than try to figure this all out and stay up to date on all of it, is we've worked with Green Energy Consumers Alliance with Anna's team to create a landing page. It's something like Green, I can put it in the chat, but it's a landing page that is specific to Melrose, but it leads people right into Green Energy Consumers. Fantastic information. So I don't have time to reinvent the wheel to go through all this stuff. Anna's the expert, so I let her do it and then lead everybody to her place. But one of the questions that I have for the National Grid and Eversource folks is, if it's still true that 80% of charging takes place at home, people's homes in their, at night, I suppose, has anybody come up with a formula of the X number of chargers needed per, density of housing, or, for, a lot of our communities are mostly residential, mostly single family homes. We have areas in our cities and towns with a lot of multifamily. What is the right number of, I know we need, right now it still feels like we're just putting them everywhere we can. But is there something that's guiding, or could be guiding us? How much is enough?
So with the data that we have access to, the Eversource and National Grid teams size our programs to meet the 20, or we base them off of hitting the 2030 goal of the state. And looking at the shorter term 2025 targets. Originally it was 300,000 EVs on the road. That was Massachusetts' commitment, now been reduced to 200,000. But looking at how many chargers exist, how many EVs the state is looking to get on the road by that time, that ambitious goal, how many chargers would we need, assuming 80%, and I'm going to forget exactly if we used 80% access to home charging, or if it was a little bit of a lower percentage, but we use the tools from the federal government through NREL, the EVI per light tool, to help us make those estimates. I will say though that the state through EEA and in partnership or through the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Coordinating Council that is being set up, will be set up. There are going to be state level plans that we will also be hoping to rely on to some extent, that are going to look broadly at what are the long-term needs based on housing stock across communities in Massachusetts, how many EVs we expect to see on the road by 2030, and what the needs are across communities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I'm seeing it's 8:30 and we do have some more information just to provide in terms of all the Mass Energized communities. So Amy is going to talk a little bit about getting access to the DOT EV data, and then we'll round it out with some general questions or things that people would like to know or share. So yeah, Amy.
Okay, thanks, Nathan, and big thanks to the speakers tonight. This is really exciting information, and I can't wait to meet with so many people. Anyways, so some of you may be aware that last year in the climate bill, the Massachusetts DOT was required to start publishing better information at community level for their vehicles. So one of the things they are working on is how many vehicles are electric, fuel cell, and plug-in hybrid electric. That data is currently available kind of by email inquiry, which we did on behalf of the Massachusetts Energized Communities right now. This summer, we did that as a preliminary step. This summer, all that information should be available freely to everyone online. I'm not sure, they weren't quite sure when the launch date is, but I think it's mandated by probably June 30th.
I think it's by September, but they think they'll have it by August.
Yeah. So basically what we have for our 21 communities that we requested, we have the number of combined electric vehicles, fuel cell electric vehicles, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and the total number of vehicles registered in that community. And so that's of February 19th, February 17th. And so I know a lot of communities were like me, they're frustrated, we didn't really have vehicle data since like 2014. There's a huge gap. And so this is a big step forward for a lot of us. And if you're a Mass Energized community and you want us to load it into your platform, so it shows on your dashboard, happy to do that for those of you. I will say we have probably 18, 20 communities on the call tonight. And the percentage of electric vehicles in the list I have ranges from like 0.28% to a high of 6.58% of all vehicles in your community. So that's the long and the short of it. We are happy to share also a connection at Mass DOT if you want and have further questions, or I'm happy to answer questions, or if you want a data update later, in a couple more months. So we're really excited to share that information with everyone. It is an update on the information we provided 1 or 2 years ago, along with a couple of other data sets on solar PV and some heat pumps. Ellen.
Yeah, so Amy, will we just share the spreadsheet of all the communities with everybody and ask them if they want us to load it, or they'll load it themselves? That seems like the easiest. We could just
Definitely. We'll include it in the follow-up materials.
Yeah, so then you'll be able to see the number of EVs as of mid-February, and we'll put the email for the gal at DOT who will answer your questions, but there'll be a portal pretty soon. I will say, I was stunned. There were way more than I thought there were in my community, and we're going to use that. We have to sort of normalize this, right? Like more and more people are doing EVs, and the numbers about in our community, Shelley, 599 in Wayland, and we have 4,800 households. So yeah, I was surprised. So I think it will be interesting what you guys think about your numbers. We'll get it to you ASAP, and let you figure out how to update it. And then let us know if you want us to load it or you want to load it yourself into your platform.
Great. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. And so I'm happy to entertain any questions, comments, any sharing that people would like to share on topics other than EVs. If you want to follow up with a few more, a few more questions just on EVs. So any thoughts or anything? Yeah, Marcia.
Saying that Green Newton is having an Earth Day festival on April 23rd, and we're going to be featuring EVs and test drives. So if you go to our website, if you want to check it out, you're welcome to come.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, any other questions or comments? Yeah, Wendy Wilkerson.
So what is the availability of EVs? I mean, I keep hearing that they're not very available, or and also been told to wait 2 years to buy one. And do you know anything about the battery component situation?
Well, I think Anna just had to leave us, so she would probably be the best person to answer that question. Does anybody else want to take that question?
Yeah, I can share just at a high level that it depends on which vehicles you're interested in. Some you can go to a dealer today and they might actually have one available. I know my brother-in-law just went and got one the other day off the lot. So they are available. Some you may have there may be a longer wait list. You put a deposit down and you may have to wait a few months. It just depends on what you're looking for. I can't speak as much to the battery components. I think there's going to be a lot more information coming through the federal, through the IRA, as Anna said, on the 18th. So I would, pay attention to that and see what information is shared about eligibility for those federal tax credits once that data becomes more available on the 18th. But it just depends on the vehicle you're looking for. Some are really available and others there's a long wait list.
Question of Eversource, and it's a timing question. In an environmental justice zone, like a school, in an environmental justice zone in Milton, what would be the timing of getting, your program in there so we could get some level 2 charging, timing of that? And then another question is, I'm trying to get a hospital. We have a Beth Israel BIDMC here, and I'm trying to get them to do solar canopies, and then I would also like to get them to do charging stations relative to that. So I know those are two very different things, but maybe answer the first one first, because that might be the easier one.
Yeah, and so I guess I'll answer with it depends on the project specifics, because even though we've done 500 different customer sites in our first phase, every project is different. So on average, from the time a customer applies to the time the charging stations are energized for a typical level 2 site, I'd say it's about 9 months. That was the average over the lifetime of our phase 1 program, which ran from 2018 through the end of last year. I will say that those times got a little bit longer later in the program as supply chain issues arose in getting certain components, depending on if the type of transformer that might have been needed, or a junction box, or certain things. It looks like those supply chain issues are stabilizing, and wait times aren't getting longer. But I would expect from the time of application to energizing anywhere from 9 months to a year is a fair estimate for an average level 2 project. But again, every site is different. It depends on if there's how much trenching, what kind of trenching, what you're going through, coordinating the contractors in this specific geography, if they're available or not, what the queue is. So there's a lot of what ifs, but that's kind of the average.
Okay, well, we're past time, but thank you all for joining us. The next meeting will be Monday. It's always a Monday evening, May 8th. And we'll be sending out, information about that. But thank you all for your questions, for being here on a Monday night, and please go out and promote EVs with all the new information you've gotten. So thank you.